Conscious capitalism is a different philosophy about business. It's trying to address the four key questions. Why do we exist? What do we do? Who are we? And how do we operate? Traditionally business has had a very narrow way of thinking, that the only reason for business to exist is to make profit, to create shareholder returns. We believe that there is a deeper purpose that every business should have, just like every human being should have a purpose in their life, not just about making money. So every business can have a deeper purpose that is connected to something that is needed in the world. So the idea of a higher purpose separate from profit. Secondly, traditional business is all about making money for investors, and we believe that business really is about creating value for all stakeholders, because all of these stakeholders, customers, employees, suppliers, communities, investors, etc., are all connected to the business, and those relationships matter a great deal in terms of the success of the business. So if we consciously seek to serve and create value for all stakeholders, that will actually enhance the flourishing of the business and ultimately also leads to higher returns for investors. But if you just focus on making money, then you end up squeezing your employees, you end up squeezing your suppliers, you end up putting burdens onto society, you end up damaging the environment, etc. That is not acceptable. So there's a better way where we think about all of the stakeholders together and try to create a win-win-win for all of them rather than squeezing some of them. The third is leadership. Conscious leaders actually care about the people that the business touches, and they care about the purpose. So they're not just about power and money and their own ego. They're driven by service. So they're servant leaders, what we also call selfless leaders. They are not selfish. They have transcended the self. And the fourth element is culture, which is how do we work. Most businesses operate with a high level of stress and a tremendous amount of fear. And as a result, we have heart attacks that are highest on Monday morning. There's a tremendous amount of suffering that happens at work because of the working conditions. And this is not necessary. In fact, it's very, very harmful. It's killing people. We can operate with a culture of trust and transparency and caring for people as human beings. It's the most important difference between a conscious business and a traditional business is that conscious businesses are built on caring for people as human beings. They're built on love and care for people. And traditional business is only built on self-interest, which is defined very narrowly as just making money. So together these four pillars create a whole different way, a higher consciousness way of existing in the world of business. And it actually leads to greater success. Financially, these companies outperform significantly in the long term. But more importantly, they don't create any negative effects. So the people are healthier, happier, communities are healthier, thriving, the environment is protected, society flourishes, everybody matters and everybody wins when you do business with this consciousness.
Would you add another advantage for the society and companies?
Another advantage?
And conscious capitalism.
Well, the advantage for society and companies is, first of all, we are creating a lot more value, a lot more wealth. We are lifting human flourishing. We are creating more prosperity. We are bringing people out of extreme poverty. It's already the last 200 years, we used to have 90% of people who were living in extreme poverty. Now it's down to 9%. Right? So we are spreading prosperity. We are lifting people out of extreme poverty. We are enabling people to live longer, fuller, more human lives as a consequence of this. But still, we can do better, and we need to do better. Well, workers or employees are extremely critical. So if we talk about the stakeholders of a business, I would say for most conscious companies, the employees are the number one stakeholder. Some might say customers are the number one stakeholders, but really it's like two wings of a bird. You need both wings to fly. But employees are extremely important because ultimately, who creates value in a business? It's really the people who work there. And in a traditional business, the way we operate results in very low levels of engagement and creativity and innovation and commitment and passion. Worldwide, only 15% of people, 15% are engaged in their work, which means 85% of people either hate their work or they don't care. And when people don't care or they hate their work, they cannot do any good work, right? And therefore those businesses cannot have happy customers, they cannot have great products, they will not have good service, none of that will happen. So it all starts with employees. And employees have to be not only respected and treated with dignity, but you have to make sure that their needs are met, that they have decent pay, good benefits like healthcare, etc. Make sure that they are not suffering, because there's a lot of stress in people's lives. If we can do everything possible to make sure that people are having peaceful, happy, joyful life, then that will impact not only their work, but also their children, their families, and the future. So it all begins at work. The way we lead impacts the way people live, and the way people live then impacts their children and their communities. So really, businesses have a great responsibility to create conditions where people are happy and fulfilled and flourishing, because they're not only impacting the bottom line, they're impacting society and the future. So the greatest responsibility for achieving better results in a business really comes from leaders, right? Leaders have to create the conditions where people can flourish. When does that happen? First of all, they have to create a sense of purpose. Why is this business important? Why do we exist? And then they have to attract people who care about the same purpose, right? And then they have to give those people lots of freedom and autonomy, right? And an opportunity to grow in that role. And when you do that, you find that the business then creates a great deal of value of multiple kinds, and people also flourish and grow. See, people are capable of extraordinary things. Ordinary people today are extraordinary. I mean, the evidence is showing us that human intelligence is rising every decade by 3 to 4%. So if you look at an ordinary person today with an average IQ, 80 years ago they would have been in the top 2% of IQ. Same person, right? So ordinary people are capable of extraordinary things. People are caring, they are intelligent, they are more and more educated, right? They are conscious, they are awakened. But the problem is that the way in which we work remains very toxic. It's like the human seed is very powerful, but the soil,
very what?
Powerful. The human seed, right? It's like the seed of a tree. It's so potent, it can grow into something amazing. But the soil that exists within organizations is very toxic. And that's the culture, right? That's the lack of values, lack of purpose, too much management, not enough leadership, all of that. So in that setting, people cannot flourish, they cannot really bring the gifts that they're capable of. So we say the people are fine, it's the leadership that is lacking. No, there absolutely is a solution. So conscious companies have to take responsibility for all of the consequences of their actions. See, traditional businesses say we're only about making money, and everything else that happens is a side effect, right? The impact on people, the impact on communities, the impact on the environment, the impact on the culture, all of that tends to be negative when you just focus on making money. And we externalize that, right? These are called externalities, so we don't have to worry about that on our income statement or our balance sheet. Well, the fact is there's no such thing called a side effect. We do things and there are all these effects. And all those effects matter, and in fact some of them matter much more than the money that we make, because we're causing damage, as you said, to the environment. We're causing damage to people's souls. We're causing damage to people's hearts, right? And people are dying young, right? And the environment is being devastated. It is possible to do business in a way that simultaneously not only does not do damage, but actually improves the environment. And there are many conscious companies that are doing that. There's a steel company in Korea I work with called POSCO. After 30 years, today the air quality is better and the water quality is better than when they started. They planted 2 million trees within the plant, the steel plant where they manufacture. So it is possible if you have the intention, right? Human creativity is unlimited. Resources are limited, but human creativity is unlimited. If you give people the challenge that we want to produce products, but at the same time we also don't want to create any harm. In fact, we want to improve the environment while we're doing that. Human beings are capable of coming up with almost miraculous solutions. But that only happens if they have a sense of purpose, if they have a sense of respect and dignity, right? And then you give them the opportunity to create these extraordinary things. So we have many examples of companies. Patagonia is a wonderful company. There's a bank in Netherlands called Triodos. Even if you look at Walmart, when they started focusing on sustainability, and they said we're going to get to zero landfill, we're not going to put anything more in the landfill, we're going to change our lighting, we're going to change our trucks, just having that intention has made a huge difference in their operations, and other companies are also copying. So this is very, very common. If you intend to do something and if you have the passion about it, you can do it. It is possible. It does exist, and therefore we know it is possible. Yeah, this is a very significant issue. The two big issues in the world are the unequal distribution of freedom and also the unequal distribution of wealth. See, freedom leads to wealth creation. This is what Adam Smith discovered. This is what the great insight is. Prosperity, freedom leads to prosperity. But then the consciousness with which you operate can lead to a concentration of that prosperity for just a few. And this is what has been happening under traditional capitalism. In the last 35 years, worker salaries have gone up basically zero, and CEO pay has gone up 937%. This is in the US. And the same story is true in many companies, many countries around the world. So businesses are operating in a way they're squeezing their employees to pay as little as possible. They're squeezing their suppliers, right? They're burdening society with all kinds of side effects, and they're trying to keep all of the benefits for themselves. This is a very harmful, very dangerous trend, because if something like this continues, this is how you have revolutions, right? This is when capitalism can be destroyed if we operate like this. Now, in conscious companies, it's a very different scenario. Conscious companies tend to pay their people at the front, the lowest paid employees tend to be much higher paid compared to others in their industry. And one of our CEOs says, please pay our people as much as possible. He's talking about people that are working at the operating level, right? So people at the operating level are paid better than average, sometimes double the industry average, but people at the top are paid much less. Okay? So there's a ratio. So Whole Foods is one good example of a conscious company. The ratio is 19 to 1. Nobody can get paid more than 19 times the average pay, right? In a typical public company, that ratio is about 400 to 1. It used to be as high as 500. Walmart is maybe 1200 to 1. But in these companies, the base is higher and the top is lower, right? And therefore, also the stock options. So what leads to wealth is stock, not so much the salary. In these companies, the stock options are given to all employees, not just to the 5 senior executives, which is very common. So as a conscious company, we will address, and they're already addressing this issue by paying their people well, by providing good benefits, by giving stock to ordinary employees, right? And therefore, by doing that, they are addressing this issue of inequality within their companies. And if we have more and more and more such companies, then that will happen at a societal level as well. But it is a real important challenge, big problem. Because right now we have people who are leaders of these large companies whose consciousness is only about maximizing money and keeping as much as they can for themselves. And that kind of consciousness is very damaging, very hurtful to the well-being of humanity. So we need leaders with a different consciousness. And that is a big challenge. How do we appoint conscious leaders who are not just about their own power and their own wealth, but they're actually about taking people to a better place?
What would be the solution?
Ultimately, it is changing the hearts and minds of leaders, awakening leaders to their own deeper consciousness about why are you a leader. We have operated in the past, as Muhammad Yunus has said, we act like money is the only game in town. There are other things that matter. Well, that's one of the big challenges. In fact, we just did a workshop in Austin, which was about awakening consciousness. The thing is, a leader has to be open and willing to explore this. Now, the problem is that our existing corporate system for decades, if not a couple of centuries now, has promoted people who are only about the numbers and about performance, right? Bottom line. And so we tend to get a very narrow-minded person, almost sociopathic. There's a high percentage of sociopaths in leaders, which means they don't care about others. They have no empathy, no compassion. They only view people as a way to achieve their own success. And unfortunately, those are the kinds of people we have been rewarding. So board of directors in companies have to look for leaders who care about people first, who have a long-term perspective, who are not in it for their own ego and their own greed. So we need servant leaders. So I think more than changing the leader who is in place, it is actually bringing in a new leader. Because some of these leaders will not change. They are just hardwired, right? They cannot change. They are not capable of changing. That's their psychology. But putting in a new leader can make a huge difference. So we need to promote and elevate conscious human beings to be leaders. And once they're a leader, they will do that. All these things will come naturally. Yeah, well, so there are 4 pillars, right? Higher purpose, stakeholder integration, conscious leaders, and caring cultures. We have a new book actually that just came out 2 weeks ago. It's called the Conscious Capitalism Field Guide, Tools for Transforming Your Organization. So it starts with purpose. How do you discover what should be your purpose as a business, other than making money, right? So we have in that book 4 chapters that are about how do you discover your purpose, how do you articulate it, how do you make it real, right, and make everybody live that purpose and make a difference. Then how do you understand your stakeholders deeply, and how do you create value for all of them, more than we have been doing in the past, right? How do you cultivate your leadership? How do you develop your leaders? Who do you select as leaders? So the book has all of that. And then how do you look at your culture and understand what is today's culture and what the culture needs to be? So there are tools, there's a journey, it's like a road. You can start going on that road to transformation.
So you have to make those questions and with those answers you take actions.
Yes, exactly. So it guides you through the activities, exercises. You come together as a management team, you think about those things, and then you make changes. Yeah, so companies should have their own internal Gini index to say what is the ratio of highest pay to average pay in the company, okay? And they should be looking to reduce that. And you reduce that by elevating the bottom and by reducing the top, okay? So internally, companies can create an economy which is actually more fair, more transparent, more egalitarian, okay? Look to pay your people at the front lines. Understand how much suffering there is. You know, when you pay people so little, they can barely feed their children, they can't get a proper house, they're always worried about money. You know, they cannot be that effective as employees. So take care of the people.
Yeah, but maybe they don't know what they are living, so they cannot feel their...
So the first thing is open your heart and mind to the people to understand their life. You know, listen compassionately to people. Because as the expression goes, you will see it when you believe it. If you believe that there is suffering in your people, you will find examples. And there is a lot of suffering. And that suffering should not be acceptable. One of the CEOs we interviewed, when he found out one of his employees is working full-time and she was homeless. And she and her 2 children were living in a car because her husband stopped paying alimony, you know, ex-husband, right? So they got kicked out of their apartment. And for 1 week, she didn't ask for help. And they had a system they could ask. And he said, I felt ashamed. We need healthy shame. Leaders, if you have people working for you who are homeless, who are struggling, who cannot take care of their children, you have some responsibility there. You should feel a deep sense of shame. We need healthy shame in our company leaders. Because otherwise it's like, I don't want to see it. I close my eyes, okay? Do your job, go home. Don't tell me about your problems. That's not okay. We have to care about everybody as human beings. So language matters. See, in business we use all this language that is dehumanized or it is militaristic. Business, the idea of business, how do we organize, how do we lead, all came from the army, right? Command and control, hierarchy, strategy, tactics, operations, front lines, headquarters. All of that language came from the military and we still use a lot of that. But business is not war. Okay, business is taking care of people. Business is serving people. It's not trying to destroy, right, and capture. When it comes to this, human resources, human beings are not a resource.
Yeah.
Okay? What is a resource? It's like a lump of coal. What happens when you use a resource? It becomes smaller and smaller, less and less, burns up, and is gone. Now, if we treat people like a resource, they become a resource. They burn out, they get exhausted, they get stressed out, they die. Human beings are the source, not a resource. What does it mean to be a source? It means you're continuously growing and generating. You're becoming wiser and smarter and more conscious. And that's what human beings are capable of, becoming more and more powerful, right, over time. Human beings are the source. This is where everything comes from. All these ideas, all these innovations, all these technologies, human beings are the most powerful kind of renewable energy this planet has ever had. But that only happens if you think of them as a source, if you give them respect and dignity, give them a sense of purpose, right? Then ordinary human beings are capable of extraordinary things. So one of the things I urge people is drop human resources, call it people. It is the people department. That makes it the most important department in any company, because it's all about people, right?